Hey guys, so I'm going to do an edit on this beautiful Nyala. I really loved this moment. It was crouched down in the grass and I literally walked right past it, crouched down in front of it to take this image. But the lighting has left this very uneventful. It looks like it has black eyes. That's actually not accurate. So we're gonna do some things here to really make this image stand out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of these flies because I find them to be distracting and they bother me. So I'm starting off using my little healing brush here. So I'm going to just click on it. As you can see, it didn't quite cover it because up here my opacity is quite low. So I'm going to put that opacity all the way up and I'm going to actually move it to heal instead of clone. And I'm just going to bring it over here where the lighting is a little bit more correct. And there, it completely makes that fly disappear beautifully. So here you see it didn't do a very good job. It's gone into a place that doesn't have the fur consistency. So we want to make sure that we're going somewhere where it's going to give the line and direction of the hairs in the same way. So that one there works good. Perfect. Looks like there was little flies everywhere. Not really sure why sometimes Lightroom brush tends to send the sample so far away from anything that looks even remotely close, but not much we can do. We got to live with it, right? Okay. There may be more, but I'll catch them in a minute if there is. Oh, there is one. So as you can see, sometimes it's going outside of my zone, so I have to just use that navigation panel to help find where it has put that little equal part. I like to do things zoomed in and it helps me see it a lot better. Okay, so now that we got these main distractions gone that were bothering me, I have to kind of decide what else here isn't right. Now, one of the things that also bothers me is this piece of grass that's running across the front of the Nyala's eye. I find it very distracting, and when looking at the piece of grass, I don't have a problem with the grass itself, but if that grass was behind the Nyala and stopped there, that would be perfect. So I'm going to now remove this blade of grass. Oh, and there's another fly. Away with you, fly. Okay, now to do this one piece of grass, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start at this spot here, right on the edge. And I'm not going to run it down because I really want to just be able to pick that edge. Make sure I get a nice, consistent looking edge. Now I can do the line down the rest of the horn here. And then you're just going to find what kind of looks right. You know, find places where there's a line and it's consistent and you're going to kind of stay on that trend. See here, I'm getting a little bit closer to the edge, so I can actually go up to the feathering and you can see where as I move that feathering, the effect that that has. So I might just take a little bit of that feathering away so that I can actually have that green coverage. To test it, I'll just take off the brush. I can't honestly tell the difference. So I'm going to continue. Now here I'm just going to do this change of the color on its own so I can be very particular about that particular spot. And from here I can just worry about, again, that one little piece of grass. Yeah, I don't mind what it chose there. Anytime there's like a little intersection of what's happening, I just stick to that on its own. Now the tough part about this is on a curve, it's really trying to get it to match that curve correctly. That worked quite well. And then here we're going to have a transition of color. So I'm just going to do one color at a time because it otherwise narrows me down to where I have to choose my selections from quite significantly. It's a labor of love doing this. Now I'm not going to worry about the eye itself, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Sometimes if you start to get funny color coming through in the healing brush, sometimes you need to do clone, because if the edge of something of a different color gets caught in that healing brush, it will start to alter things and it will start to look, you know, incorrect or just unusual. So I've gotten it down to here. It still looked a little weird. I'm going to take another crack at just making that a little bit smaller. Now that does seem to kind of disappear in behind, and I'm happy with that. So again, you know, this eye is causing a bit of a problem. So before I do anything about that, I actually need to change all my color correction on this completely. So thus far I've done nothing. If you have any presets that you like to use, it's a good way to start. I'm going to just go from scratch here. So I do need to warm this up significantly. And I need to lighten some of those shadows. You can start to see the difference in the eye that makes. So I'm going to pull out all my shadows. Looking at my whites, I'm going to bring those up. Really starts to bring to life what's happening in this image. And then, you know, you just try different things. So, you know, what does highlights do? As you can see in my histogram, it's starting to clip it up on the side. So you can see that that's no good. So we want to bring those down and not actually have any clipping. So you can see I still have some there. It's not terrible, but I'm not happy about it. So I'm going to take that highlights all the way down. There's still a minor bit of clipping that's coming from the whites. So I'm going to take those down a little bit as well. So what we're left with is a much brighter, much better exposed image. The shadows and everything are still bringing this down a little bit, but that's okay because I'm actually going to get rid of a lot of it and darken up the background quite a bit. So let's have a look at this eye. So we can see there is a fly. I don't like it. Shocking. This one I got to be pretty particular about, and I need to just erase the fly and not the eye. So I'm not happy with that, but it's hard to do any other way. So I'm just going to do another one to try to clean up the edge. This is a labor of love, as I said. Okay, it's better. So now I'm going to work on this eye in general. I'm going to try starting with a radial brush, radial circle, and see what happens. So I'm going to be able to tailor this in a second. So what I'm going to do, I do have a little bit of white balance here. I'm going to just double click the effect, and then that clears any previous settings. So now I am going to increase my exposure. And I see what's happening though is the dark section, of course, is lightening, and I don't really want that. I want the blacks to stay black. So I'm not going to go with exposure. So I can I can darken my blacks, except that's going to take out the whole eye again. So we do one thing at a time, and if what we do doesn't work, we try something else. So if I go with my lights, okay, well now this is starting to bring up the correct area. I'm going to add a little bit of noise remover because it's getting a little bit too fuzzy. I'm going to go in with my actual adjustment brush, clear the effects, and increase on just the whites and just paint over this particular area. You can increase saturation on the eye and then kind of watch what's happening with the color, making sure it stays true. And I'm going to add some warmth in the temperature because that is very accurate to what the Nyala's eye actually looks like. I'm going to take a new brush, clear the previous effects, and I'm going to drop my blacks and come in here just over that section and right in here over these darker sections. Now, because I'm choosing the blacks, it's only affecting the areas that actually have black pigmentation in them. So you see it really pops that eye out a lot better, which is awesome. I'm going to do another adjustment brush. And this time, clearing the effects, I'm going to drop the shadows a bit because that's what we're getting into here. This is all shadow work where the blacks won't necessarily cut it. And same with some of this darker section here. It's just going to pick up those areas that are a little bit darker than the rest. New brush, clear effects. And now I'm going to go exposure and I'm going to go small. So up in here, this is the catch light in the eye coming through. So even though it's hard to see, we do want to still show it because that's kind of what brings an eye to life. It gives us the realism. So we absolutely want to showcase those moments. I'll just spruce up a few of the spots that are a little bit lighter here. Just help give a little bit more punch and definition to some of these spots. Okay, definitely looking better. So at this point, what I'm going to do is, because this eye over here is quite destroyed, and I don't see how I can save it, I'm going to show you how we can go in Photoshop and we can actually take this eye and make it this eye. So let's do that now. Okay, so now that we're opened in Photoshop, I've zoomed in a little bit closer and I've also chosen my lasso tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a layer. So I'm going to go Command J. It's going to make a duplicate layer. So I am working off of that and not my background. And now I'm just going to go and do a loose selection, leaving out the grass, of this eye. Now what I want to do, layer via copy. And what we can see over here now is we have a layer and there's a little teeny eye on that layer. So that layer is actually two eyes right now. If I change to my move tool, and I'm currently highlighted on the layer, I can go now, click on it and move that eye. Okay, so Command T is going to now select that for transformation. Now I need to flip it. So I right click, flip horizontal, boom, and move it towards where I'm going to want it to go. Now, because I was front and center with this animal, it was very symmetrical. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but it's pretty darn close. When you look at the edges here, how it lines up, and this lines up, and this lines up, you know, this is pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the check mark and say, yes, I like that there, but obviously it's not perfect. We have some work to do. that's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a mask on this layer. Down here, select the mask. Now when we go to paint, I have a loose brush. So go with something soft and round. And then your blacks and your whites are going to do two different things when you paint over with your mask. So I'm going to use my square parentheses to make this smaller. And as you can see with the black, as I paint over it, it starts to erase that mask layer that I just put there and start to reveal what's behind it, which in this case is almost the exact same thing. Now in here is where I had some grass, so I need to kind of be careful and just keep some of this blending pretty minor. At the moment that I've blended too much or I need to put back what I've taken away, then I'm going to just change it to white and paint back on what I'm painting off in this moment. I'm just going to look for these places where there's edges, and you just make for more natural blending. And it really starts to look like this eye really belongs on there, right? It's amazing what they can do, and the mathematics behind programs like Photoshop now is just unbelievable. Sorry, you have to listen to all of my million little clicks of my mouse. It's a great mouse. It's just very noisy. So if this wasn't so symmetrical, while in transform, I would select to warp, and I would kind of move it so the perspective was a little bit different. And in most cases, you know, for my actual original version of this, I did do that. I did distort this eye just slightly as the original was. Then it's not like 100% duplicate and it's not so obvious. But, oops, didn't mean to do that. I'm not going to do that at this stage of the game, just for, you know, time and consistency. So see, here's where that piece of grass was. Now I'll show you how I can change and go to the white and paint over that. So now we see if I paint over this way, that's good. It makes it go away. So I just have to worry about this line at the bottom. So I'm going to make it a lot smaller, change my paint color back to black, and just be much more particular about the edge, because I don't have a lot of room before that grass gets in the way. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm also happy that this has a little bit of a mark here under its eye. It makes it a little bit different than the other side. So that's super good, super helpful. While I'm over here in Photoshop, if you're not overly familiar, there's things that you can use, and I'll show you one of them. If you didn't like these little specks, or if we still had the fly here and you didn't like it, one of the things you can do is this spot healing brush tool. I'm going to highlight both of these and go Command E, which compresses them into the single layer. Now I've selected the layer which can actually touch this, so boom, it makes those little speckles go away. So it's a super easy, quick way to deal with some of the rather, you know, annoying little spots that you find distracting. Some people say, well, they're natural, they belong there. And I think if that's what you end up noticing, then maybe it wasn't helpful. So if I didn't like this spot, I could just press it and pretty much make it go away. If I didn't like that fly, this probably won't work. Let's see what happens. Well, it's not terrible, actually, considering if I don't like that, I can go into my history and I can remove that and let the fly stay. And in this case, you know what? We're going to let it stay. Why not? Okay, so I think we're done here. We're going to take this back into Lightroom now. So I just go File, Save, and it'll open us back up there. Okay, so we're back, and now we can see we've got a beautiful pair of eyes just staring at us. So I'm going to make a radial circle, and from here on out, you know what, you're really just trying to figure out what you like, what's going to work for you. Just to show you a different effect, instead of working on the face of the Nyala, I'm going to go to invert. Now whatever I do is going to affect everything but the face. So if I want to bring down the overall exposure and almost create a mood, that's what I'm going to do. So immediately the attention goes more focused to the face. I didn't go severe, but I went far enough. Now around these eyes, I really want to be able to showcase those. I'm going to do one side and we'll just see what happens. I'm going to increase the exposure, boost the temperature just a tad, and increase some clarity. If I kind of like how that looks, then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to take it to the other side. Everything I do is being balanced. And I'm just doing this because sometimes it's easier than the brushing on. With this, you can also choose your feathering. So, whatever adjustments you do are just going to slowly drift away, which is nice. One of the things that I want to do on these horns is I really want to bring attention to them. I'm going to first do an overall contrast. That really seems to punch out this image quite a bit. But up here we have this line. And I think if I'm able to highlight that a little bit better, it's really going to help. So I'm going to use my adjustment brush for this, clear it off. And I think for this case, I'm going to increase the temperature a little bit, warm it up, and a little bit of exposure. We can change this as we go, so no problem. We just have to draw it on. And the other thing I can do here is I can hit the letter O, and it's actually going to highlight whatever I'm doing. Now in this case, I also want to auto mask, which is this little button here. And what this is going to do is where there's a change in color and light, it is not going to spread. So you see how much cleaner that was versus the first part here. So I want to erase this now because I think we can do a nicer job. And I can do that by clicking my Option key and it makes a minus sign. So I can now erase what I did. But bearing in mind, it's auto masking. So see, it didn't do a very clean job. If I take off the auto mask, then it'll get everything. Auto mask back on. And I'm going to come along and do that line. So it's a much cleaner line, as you can see. And then it just goes into this lighter area. And I'm going to come over to this side and do the same thing. Sometimes it's not perfect, but we always have the ability to just go in and really tidy up. See what happened there? Auto mask read something else because I would have moved my cursor too far over and that little plus sign touched something different, which I didn't want it to. We'll try that. I'm going to take the O off so I can actually see what my image looks like now. Still is quite blue. So I'm going to warm it up that little bit more. I don't mind if this starts to get more in the warmy red kind of tones. I'm going to add a little bit of magenta. I prefer that look instead. Lighten the shadows a little bit and the whites. Much better. So much more defined. That's what I was kind of going for. Can definitely come along with the adjustment brush and just go with some darker shadows and just find the areas where that light is just hitting it different or not hitting it, and these shadows are getting created, and just kind of help give it that natural contrast. So the darks are darks and the lights are light, and it really is going to draw the eye in. So now it's all about personal taste. Just trying to get something to give the vision that you were hoping, whether it's you're trying to create a mood, you're trying to tell a story. But contrast is definitely the way to do that. I do another one where I'm gonna lighten my highlights, lighten my whites. I'm not gonna go over the white section, it's already light enough. But some of these other spots. This is also on auto mask, so as I go beside an area that's light, it won't affect the areas that are dark. Unless, of course, I go over them with my plus sign, which happens. Again, if you're in doubt, if you've gone over an area you didn't mean to, you can always just hit that O button and it's going to highlight for you the areas that you just affected. Just for fun, sometimes, I like to try to see how things sometimes look. I'm going to pull up a gradient tool and I'm going to see what happens if I slowly drop my exposure. I'm going to brighten my highlights because I want these spots of the horns to still show up, the shadows to go down, the whites to come up. And I just do that and I try to decide if I like it or not. And I don't mind. So I could come in here and do the same thing if I wanted. See what happens if you kind of darken off some of that exposure. There's really nothing else there I'm trying to preserve. I can duplicate that. I can spin it around and pull it over to the other side, keeping everything balanced. It's a quick way of doing it, but in a way that's gradual. I think this looks great. For my website, I would probably work a little bit more on my color tones and more on my shadows and my highlights. But I think for this, where it stands, it looks really beautiful. So if we were to do a before and after, you see a significant difference. Some people say you can do great wildlife photography in your camera and you don't need to post-process. And I'm not going to disagree, but what I am going to do is I'm going to look at an image like this and go, you know what? I didn't have any direct light. This was, a very overcast day and I could not in any way bring that image to life and do it the justice that it needed. So I think that this does it. I hope that you learned a few techniques and, seen some interesting stuff that might help you recover and save some of your photos in the future. If, there's anything that you're curious about or you want to see, just drop me a line and I'd be happy to attempt it in a tutorial for you. Take care, guys. Subscribe to my channel. Find me on rockandroars.ca. Come on safari with me if you dare.